The waiting room fell silent when the woman in the faded raincoat set a laminated badge on the receptionist's desk. The kind of badge that only existed in one place, the kind with a silver founder's seal that hadn't been issued in 11 years. The receptionist didn't recognize it. Neither did the two security guards who'd spent the last 20 minutes trying to convince the woman to leave. They saw a tired-looking stranger in her mid-40s, hair pulled back without ceremony, holding the hand of a small boy who kept pressing his face against the glass wall of the lobby to watch the fish tank inside. They saw someone who didn't belong. They didn't know they were looking at Dr. Nora Calloway, the woman who had built Meridian Health Solutions from a single clinic in rural Tennessee into a network of 47 community hospitals serving populations that nobody else would serve. The woman whose name was still on the incorporation documents, whose signature was still on the original mission charter hanging in the executive conference room on the 14th floor. The woman whose board had quietly voted to replace her 11 years ago while she was sitting at her daughter's bedside in a children's hospital 3 states away. If you want to know how she walked back in and took it all apart from the inside out, stay until the end. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Now let's begin. Nora's grandson wouldn't let go of her hand. That was the first thing Claire Sutton noticed when she glanced down from the executive floor through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Meridian's marble atrium. A woman in a damp raincoat standing near the reception desk, fingers laced with a boy who couldn't have been older than 7. He wore a green backpack shaped like a turtle. She wore the kind of expression that people wore when they'd been carrying something for a very long time and had simply run out of places to set it down. Claire looked away. She had a board meeting in 8 minutes and a presentation that had taken her team 3 weeks to prepare. She didn't have bandwidth for whatever was unfolding in the lobby. Her assistant, Marcus, appeared at her office door. "Mr. Sutton? Front desk is asking if you want security to escort someone out. Woman's been there almost half an hour. Won't give a name, won't make an appointment. Says she needs to speak to whoever runs the company now." Claire checked her watch. "Tell them to handle it professionally." She grabbed her folder. "And tell Graham I'm on my way up." She didn't look back. She didn't see the way Nora's jaw tightened when the second security guard stepped forward. Didn't hear the boy ask, in a voice just loud enough to carry, "Grandma, why do they keep looking at us like that?" The 14th floor conference room was all chrome and ambient lighting, and the particular silence of a room where expensive decisions were made. Richard Holt sat at the head of the table, silver cufflinks, practiced smile. He'd been COO for 9 years, longer than Claire had been CEO. She sometimes wondered if he'd wanted her job. Most days she was too busy to care. "Claire." He gestured to the chair beside him. "Thomas is almost done with the numbers." Thomas Vane, CFO, looked up from his laptop with the expression of a man who'd replaced all his human warmth with spreadsheet fluency. "Acquisition announcement today puts us at a projected 12% jump by Friday. We're not announcing today," Claire said, setting her folder down. "I want another full review of the operational restructuring terms before we go public." Richard's smile didn't move, but something behind it recalibrated. "We've reviewed them twice, Claire. The board is ready to vote. Delaying sends a message we can't afford to send. Rushing sends a worse one. Creston Health isn't going to wait forever." Richard's voice dropped into the register he used when he wanted to sound like a mentor. "They've given us the best acquisition offer this company has seen in a decade. If we hesitate, then they'll wait or they won't." Claire opened her folder. "Either way, I'm not signing off on anything until I'm certain it protects our community partnerships. That's not negotiable." Thomas made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "We're a healthcare network, not a charity." "We're both," Claire said. "Meridian was founded on the principle that rural communities deserve the same access to quality care as anyone else. If this acquisition undermines that, we have a problem." "The founder," Richard said, leaning back, "hasn't been part of this organization for over a decade. The world has changed. Markets have changed." Claire wanted to say something sharp. She didn't get the chance. Marcus appeared in the doorway, face carefully neutral in the way people's faces got when something was wrong, but they weren't sure how wrong. "I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a situation in the lobby." Richard waved his hand. "We're in the middle of. It's escalating," Marcus said. "I thought Miss Sutton should see it herself." Claire stood. "Start without me." She took the elevator down, expecting a disgruntled former patient or a vendor with a grievance. What she found was contained chaos dressed up in corporate politeness. 2 guards flanked the woman in the raincoat. The boy, 7, maybe 8, had stopped looking at the fish tank. He was watching the guards with the focused attention of a child trying to understand something adults kept refusing to explain. Diane, the head receptionist, 61 years old, had worked the front desk since Meridian's second year of operation, was standing between the guards and the woman with both hands slightly raised, not aggressive, just present, a human buffer. "Ma'am," one of the guards was saying, "you need to leave the premises or we'll have to involve the police." "I'm not threatening anyone," the woman said. Her voice was level, controlled in the way that takes years to learn. "I just need 5 minutes with whoever's making decisions here, without an appointment, without clearance, Grandma." The boy tugged her hand. "My feet hurt." Claire came down the last few steps, heels on marble. The small crowd of employees who drifted over dispersed quickly. The guard straightened. She studied the woman up close. The raincoat was old but not dirty. Her shoes were practical, the kind worn by someone who walked a lot. Her eyes were sharp and entirely unafraid. There was something familiar about her face, something Claire couldn't land on, like a word sitting just out of reach. "I'm Claire Sutton, CEO. You wanted to speak with someone in charge?" "Yes." The woman shifted slightly, keeping her body angled toward the boy. Protective, instinctive. "There are financial irregularities inside this organization that I believe constitute deliberate fraud. I need someone to hear that before it's too late to stop it, then submit a complaint through our ethics hotline, and I've tried 3 times in the past 2 months. The reports disappear." Claire frowned. "That's a serious allegation." "It is." The woman didn't look away. "I can prove it." A new voice cut in from behind Claire. "Oh, this is something." Thomas had followed her down. Richard too, which surprised her. Thomas walked forward with the particular stride of a man who'd never once doubted he had the right to take up space. "Claire, seriously? You left the board meeting for this?" He looked at the woman the way people look at things they're about to step around. "Is she a patient? A protester? What exactly is the story here?" "I'm someone who knows what this company was built to do," the woman said. "Right." Thomas smiled, not warmly. "And what was it built to do, in your expert opinion?" "To make sure that a family in Harlan County, Kentucky didn't have to drive 2 hours for a mammogram. To make sure that a kid in the Mississippi Delta could see a doctor before a minor infection became a crisis. To make sure, very poetic." Thomas turned to Claire. "She's clearly been rehearsing." The boy looked up at Thomas. "Why are you being mean?" The lobby went very quiet. Thomas glanced down. "Kids shouldn't be brought to corporate buildings, and adults shouldn't talk to children that way," the woman said. Her voice had dropped half a register, still controlled, but something underneath it had gone hard. Claire felt something shift in her chest. Not policy, not procedure, something older than both. "Thomas." Her voice came out quieter than she expected. "Go back upstairs. Claire." "Now." Thomas and Richard exchanged a look she was supposed to miss. Then Richard touched Thomas's arm, the gesture of a man steering a situation, and they both moved toward the elevator. Not before Thomas glanced back at the woman with an expression that wasn't contempt exactly. Something worse, dismissal. The guards still flanked the woman. The boy had pressed himself against her side, one hand gripping her coat. Claire looked at the child, then at the woman. "Conference room. First floor. You have 10 minutes. The woman's expression didn't change. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet." The first floor conference room was small and windowless and smelled faintly of printer toner. Claire sat across from them and waited. The boy, whose name turned out to be Miles, immediately pulled a battered sketchbook and a set of colored pencils from the turtle backpack and started drawing something with great concentration. "Talk," Claire said. The woman folded her hands on the table. "Your CFO has been routing payments through a network of ghost vendors for at least 4 years. The total I've been able to document is somewhere north of $38 million. Your CEO is aware of it and has been structuring the Creston acquisition to obscure the losses and to secure himself a consulting contract worth $60 million once the deal closes." Claire's blood went cold. "That's an extraordinary claim. It's documented." The woman reached into a weathered canvas bag and set a USB drive on the table. "Wire transfers, shell company registrations, email chains. All of it's organized. Where did you get this? I've been collecting it for 8 months." "That's not what I asked." "No," the woman said, "it isn't." Claire stared at the drive. "If what you're describing is accurate, and I'm not conceding that it is, why come to me? Why not go to federal regulators directly?" "Because I wanted to give the people inside a chance to fix it first." The woman's voice was quiet. "Because I still believe this company can be what it was supposed to be, and federal investigations have a way of burning everything down, not just the rotten parts. Why would you care what this company becomes?" The woman looked at her for a long moment. "Because I care about the patients." Miles looked up from his sketchbook. "Grandma, can I have water?" "Of course, sweetheart." She touched the top of his head gently. He went back to drawing, satisfied. Claire watched them. Then she said, "You still haven't told me your name." Does it matter right now? I don't extend trust to anonymous sources. The woman smiled. It was a small, tired, complicated smile. Trust. That's an interesting word from someone who let her executives humiliate an old woman and a child in her own lobby. I stopped it. You let it start. I didn't know. You saw us standing there. You sent security instead of coming down yourself. That was a choice, Miss Sutton. You made it. Claire wanted to argue. She didn't, because the woman was right. Who are you? She asked again. Quieter this time. Someone who built something here and watched it get hollowed out from the inside by people who were only ever interested in what it was worth. The woman glanced at Miles. Look at what's on that drive tonight. Alone. Don't tell Richard. Don't tell Thomas. Not until you've seen it with your own eyes. She stood and helped Miles pack up his colored pencils. He held up his sketchbook to show Claire. He'd drawn the fish tank from the lobby, blue and green and full of careful, slightly lopsided fish. That's beautiful, Claire said, and meant it. Miles studied her seriously. You have sad eyes, Miles, his grandmother said gently. It's okay. Claire met his gaze. You might be right. The woman took his hand and walked toward the door. Then she paused without turning around. This company was built by someone who believed that where you were born shouldn't determine whether you lived or died. Don't let that die because it became inconvenient. Then she was gone. Claire sat alone in the conference room for a long time. The USB drive sat on the table between her and nothing. She picked it up and went back to work. She opened the drive at 9:30 that night, locked in her office with the blinds drawn and Marcus sent home. She told herself she'd look for an hour. She was there until 4 in the morning. The files were methodical. Whoever had compiled them had the mind of an auditor and the patience of someone who'd been waiting a very long time to be believed. Meridian Health Solutions had 43 active vendor contracts for operational support services. 11 of those vendors did not exist. The businesses were registered, the licenses were valid, the websites were real enough, but when Claire traced the addresses, 3 were vacant lots, 4 were UPS stores, and 1 was a laundromat in Memphis that had been closed since 2019. Payments to these vendors over the past 4 years totaled $38.4 million. Every payment had been approved by Thomas Vane. Every approval had been co-signed by Richard Holt. The acquisition documents were worse. Creston Health had privately valued Meridian at $2.9 billion. The deal being presented to the board was structured at $1.8 billion. The $1.1 billion difference was not going to shareholders. It was being absorbed through a series of valuation adjustments that Thomas had engineered over 8 months. Adjustments that made the lower number look fair to anyone who didn't read past page 40 of the financial annexes. And buried in the Creston integration contract, exactly where the woman had told her to look, a clause giving Creston the unilateral right to discontinue any program deemed operationally non-essential within 24 months of closing. No board approval required, no community review process, nothing. The rural clinic networks would be gone within 2 years, the mobile health units, the maternal care programs in communities where the nearest OB was 60 miles away, all of it. Claire sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called Franklin Webb, the board chairman, at 4:15 in the morning. He answered on the 3rd ring, which told her he'd been awake. Claire, he said carefully, what's happened? She told him everything. She heard his breathing change as he read the files she sent. When he spoke again, his voice was different, older somehow. The woman who gave you this, what did she look like? Claire described her. The raincoat, the steady eyes, the boy named Miles. Franklin was quiet for so long that Claire thought the call had dropped. Franklin, I need you to listen to me very carefully. His voice was barely above a whisper. Don't confront Richard. Don't go near Thomas. Don't do anything until I get there. We have the evidence. We should. Claire, do you know who founded this company? Dr. Nora Calloway. She left the board 11 years ago after. She didn't leave, Franklin said. She was pushed out. Forced to resign while her daughter was dying. We told her it was temporary, that we'd bring her back once things stabilized. We lied. His voice cracked, just slightly. And I have spent 11 years telling myself it was necessary and knowing it wasn't. That woman in your lobby today, Claire. That was Nora. The name landed like a stone dropped from a height. Nora Calloway, who had founded Meridian in a converted farmhouse with her own savings and her late husband's life insurance money. Whose name was on the mission charter. Whose photograph, the official one, the one from the early days before anyone knew what Meridian would become, still hung in the main corridor on the 3rd floor. That's not possible. Call her. Franklin's voice was firm now. I'll be there by morning. But Claire, when you see her again, you apologize. That woman handed you the tools to save what she built, knowing you might not believe her, knowing you might side with Richard. She trusted you anyway. Why? A long pause. Because she said you reminded her of herself. The line went quiet. Claire sat in her dark office with the USB drive in her hand and thought about a woman who'd built 47 hospitals and then watched them be taken apart for parts, piece by piece, over a decade from the outside with nowhere to put her grief. She opened her email and started typing. The board received the message at 5:03 a.m. By 5:45, Claire's phone had stopped ringing and started screaming. Franklin arrived at 7, moving slowly, leaning on a cane she hadn't seen him use at their last meeting. He looked at her in a way that held both pride and an apology he didn't have language for yet. They sat in her office, the files spread across 3 monitors, and they made a plan. Nora arrived at 8, not through the lobby this time. Through the side entrance, the one that had been coded to her keycard, a keycard she had apparently never returned and that no one had thought to deactivate. Miles wasn't with her this morning. She'd left him with a neighbor's family. Claire noticed the difference immediately. Without him there, Nora seemed both lighter and more exposed. Like a woman who'd been using her grandson as a reminder that there were things more important than corporate warfare, and now had to face the warfare on its own terms. They met in conference room 1 this time. Full windows. Natural light. Claire had asked Marcus to bring real coffee and food that required actual cooking, not boxed pastries, small things. But she'd spent the night thinking about the moment she'd looked down from the 14th floor and decided to send security instead of going down herself. She was trying, in whatever ways she still could, to make different choices. "I owe you an apology," Claire said, before Nora had fully sat down. Nora looked at her steadily. "For yesterday, for all of it. For not coming down sooner. For the way Thomas spoke to Miles." Claire paused. "For what happened 11 years ago, which I know I wasn't part of, but which I've benefited from, and which I should have questioned when I took this job." Nora was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Did you read the files? Every word. And I sent an email to the full board at 5 this morning." Something shifted in Nora's face. Not quite a smile. Something more complicated. Relief, maybe, mixed with the particular weariness of a person who's been waiting a very long time for someone to finally do the obvious thing. Franklin cleared his throat from across the table. "Nora." She looked at him for a long moment. "Franklin, I know an apology doesn't cover." "No," she said, "it doesn't. But it's a start." She turned back to Claire. "What's the board saying?" Half of them are in crisis mode. The other half are waiting to see which way the wind blows. Claire set down her coffee. "Richard already knows something's happened. He texted me 3 times before 6. "What did you say?" "Nothing." Nora nodded. "Good, don't give him time to prepare a narrative." The board meeting started at 10. Nora walked into the room and the effect was immediate. A full second of stunned silence before everyone began reacting at once. Richard's face went through several calculations before it settled on something that looked like controlled fury wrapped in professional courtesy. "Nora," his voice was smooth. "This is unexpected. I imagine it is." She sat down and set a folder on the table, not the USB drive this time. Printed documents. The physical kind, the kind that were harder to dismiss. "Thank you all for being here. You don't have standing in this meeting," Thomas said. His voice was tighter than usual. The confidence had developed a crack in it overnight. "You're not on the board." "No," Nora said, "but I am still the majority shareholder." "Something I suspect you both forgot, or hoped I had." She opened the folder. "I never transferred my shares. The paperwork for the transition 11 years ago was structured in a way that removed me from governance without touching my equity. I've had lawyers reviewing it for the past several months. It stands." The room went very quiet. Richard recovered first. "Even if that's true, you haven't been involved in operations for over a decade. You don't understand the current landscape. The Creston deal is the best opportunity. The Creston deal is structured to transfer a $1 billion gap from the company's balance sheet into a private consulting arrangement for you." Nora's voice was level. Page 47 of the financial annex. "The integration restructuring fee, $60 million. Payable to a consulting entity registered to your brother's address in Phoenix." Thomas made a sound like a man whose chair had suddenly given way beneath him. "That is," Richard said, "categorically not what that payment represents." "Then explain it." He didn't. Board member after board member began reaching for the documents in front of them. Reading. Rereading. Claire watched the room's temperature drop in real time. "I want to propose a vote," Nora said. "Immediate removal of Richard Holt and Thomas Vane from their executive positions. Simultaneous referral of all documented financial irregularities to federal authorities. Cancellation of the Creston acquisition under the fraud clause in the original merger agreement." Franklin seconded before she'd finished the sentence. The vote was 7-3. Richard stood slowly. For a moment, he just looked at Nora. Something passed across his face that Claire couldn't fully read. Anger, yes, but underneath it, something that might have been a kind of bewildered respect. You planned all of this, he said, coming in like that yesterday. The raincoat, the child. I came in like a person who had no appointment and very little leverage, Nora said quietly. Because that's what I was. I'm still not entirely sure it worked. It worked, Miles would have said if he'd been there. He wasn't. But the way Nora said it, Claire thought she could hear him in the shape of the words. Security escorted Richard and Thomas out. The room breathed differently afterward. Lighter and also more fragile, the way air feels after a storm has passed but before you've checked the damage. Claire called a press conference for that afternoon. She stood at the podium in Meridian's lobby and said things she'd been afraid to say out loud for the 3 years she'd been running the company. That the mission wasn't a marketing line, that rural communities weren't an afterthought, that the people this company had been built to serve were going to remain the people it served. Then she stepped back and Nora stepped forward. The lobby had never been that quiet. Nora stood at the microphone in the same raincoat as the day before. She hadn't changed it, Claire realized. Maybe deliberately. Maybe not. 11 years ago, Nora said, I founded this organization with money I couldn't afford to lose and a belief I couldn't afford to abandon, that medical care is not a privilege you earn by being born in the right zip code. My daughter was dying, and the board used that moment to remove me from the company I'd built. I let them because I had to choose between fighting for a building full of offices and sitting next to my child. She paused. I don't regret the choice. But I do regret what it cost the people this company was supposed to serve. A reporter shouted, Are you returning as CEO? Nora shook her head. No. I have a 7-year-old grandson who draws very accurate fish and believes strongly in the importance of a regular bedtime. My days of 14-hour meetings are behind me. She looked at Claire. This company is in capable hands. What I'm doing is making sure those hands have something worth holding on to. The questions kept coming. Claire answered most of them. Nora answered a few. Franklin stood slightly off to the side and said very little, which was, Claire had come to understand his particular form of support. After, when the cameras had cleared and the reporters had filed out, and the lobby had returned to its usual low hum, Claire found Nora standing near the third-floor corridor window, looking at her own photograph on the wall. The old one. The early one. The one where she looked like someone who believed, with her whole body, that what she was doing was going to work. What do you need? Claire asked. From you? From all of us. Nora turned away from the photograph. I want the mobile clinic program reinstated. All 12 units. I want the maternal care partnerships restored in every county we pulled out of. I want a patient advocacy board with actual authority, not just advisory capacity. She looked at Claire steadily, and I want an annual report that's honest, not investor relations honest, actually honest. What we did, what we failed to do, what we're trying to fix, you'll have all of it. I know I will, Nora said. That's the only reason I trusted you with this. The weeks after were brutal in the particular way that necessary things often are. The stock dropped. Investors panicked. Federal investigators arrived with briefcases and polite expressions and stayed for 2 weeks. Richard retained lawyers within 24 hours. Thomas, it turned out, had not retained anyone yet, which told Claire something about how guilty he felt. What surprised her was everything that came in from the outside. A clinic administrator in eastern Kentucky emailed to say that Meridian's rural network had caught her own cancer early enough to treat. She'd been a patient, not just an administrator. A school nurse in rural Mississippi wrote to say that the mobile unit program had been the only pediatric resource for 3 towns for 6 years. A man in western Tennessee wrote in careful block letters that his wife was alive because a Meridian nurse had driven 40 minutes to do a home visit when she couldn't get to a clinic. Claire forwarded every email to Nora. Nora's responses were always short. This one. Keep this one. This is why. The legal proceedings against Richard and Thomas lasted longer than anyone wanted. Richard fought everything with the resources of a man who'd spent a decade accumulating the kind of wealth that buys very good lawyers. Thomas accepted a plea arrangement in exchange for testimony. Neither outcome felt fully satisfying. Claire had wanted something cleaner. Marcus told her clean didn't really exist in this kind of case, and she suspected he was right. What did exist, slowly and then all at once, was something she hadn't expected. Trust. Employees started reporting things. Not big things, not all at once, but small things. A vendor contract that looked slightly off. A budget line that didn't add up. A decision that seemed to bypass the usual oversight. They reported them to Claire directly, or to the new ethics board, or to the patient advocacy committee that Nora had insisted on. Most of the reports were minor. Some weren't. All of them mattered. Meridian did not return to what it had been before the scandal. That company was gone. But what emerged in its place was something that felt, to Claire, more like the company that Nora had described in that first conference room. Quieter, more careful, more honest about the distance between its values and its practices. 6 months after Richard's removal, on the day the federal indictment was formally filed, Nora came back to the building one more time. She brought Miles. He went immediately to the fish tank and stood there with his hands and his nose pressed against the glass, cataloging. They stood in Nora's old office, Claire's office now, and looked out at the city. "How is he?" Claire asked. "Good." Nora watched her grandson through the glass wall. He started a new school. He's been drawing buildings lately instead of fish. He says he wants to design hospitals when he grows up. She paused. He says they should have better chairs in the waiting rooms. He's not wrong. He rarely is. Nora smiled, fully this time, without the complicated weight underneath it. He told his teacher that his grandmother fixed a hospital. His teacher asked him what was wrong with it. He said the people running it forgot who it was for. Claire felt something tighten in her throat. Smart kid. His mother was smart. Nora said it simply, without the grief reaching all the way to the surface. 11 years of practice, maybe, or just a different kind of relationship with loss. She would have been impossible to argue with by now. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Below, the city moved through its ordinary business, indifferent to the fact that a company had just spent 6 months fighting for its own soul. "I got a call yesterday," Claire said finally. "New investors. Ethical Infrastructure Fund. They specifically want to put money into our rural network expansion." "I know," Nora said. "I sent them to you." Claire looked at her. "Of course you did. They're good people, careful people. Take the meeting, but negotiate hard. Make sure the community programs are structurally protected, not just promised. That's what I'm going to do, I know." Nora picked up her bag. "That's why I can leave." She paused at the door. "Claire, yeah, you asked me in that first meeting why I still cared what this company became." She looked back across the office. "I'll tell you now. My husband died before we opened the first clinic. He believed in what we were building more than anyone. I used to think I was building it for him. Later I thought I was building it for my daughter. Now I think I was building it for Miles, and for all the kids like him, born in places where distance is a medical condition." She held the door. "Make sure it's still worth something by the time he grows up." She left. Miles ran over, grabbed his turtle backpack, and followed her, calling back over his shoulder, "Bye, hospital lady. I like the fish." Claire stood alone in her office for a long time. Later, she would get an email from the clinic administrator in Kentucky. Simple subject line, "Still here." 2 sentences inside, "I had my 5-year scan last week." All clear. She would forward it to Nora with no comment. Nora would write back, "Good, keep going." And Claire would. Because the work was imperfect and the company was imperfect and she was imperfect. And none of that turned out to be a reason to stop. Sometimes the most important thing a person could do was simply refuse to look away when looking away would have been easier. Sometimes that was enough to change everything.